Hi, in this video I will show you how to create an HTTPS endpoint for JSON file upload into Amazon S3 bucket. In this video we will try to build a solution which will actually provides us an HTTPS URL. With using that, we can upload the data into the Amazon S3 bucket as a JSON file. So here we're going to use all PaaS services, especially API gateway, AWS Lambda, and then of course the backend is our Amazon S3 bucket. Now, as you know that API gateway is a service which can provide you the HTTPS endpoint, which is acting as an API through which you can try to do your your business logic. Here our business logic is that when I invoke this API endpoint, I need my payload to be converted into a JSON on the fly, and it should be stored in Amazon S3 bucket. So in this video we will see how these files, like these JSON files, can be dynamically uploaded into the Amazon S3 bucket via an HTTPS invoke. So here we will show how we can construct this solution with using API gateway and the AWS Lambda, and finally we will see that when I hit this HTTPS API endpoint with a payload, that payload gets automatically converted into JSON and the file gets stored into the Amazon S3 bucket. So basically this is an example how you can construct a REST API that will help you to upload the file into the Amazon S3 bucket. Now I'm in AWS account, so this is my AWS account, and currently we are in API gateway service, right? So in this API gateway service we're going to create an example instance of API gateway. Then we're going to make it tightly coupled with the AWS Lambda, or basically we're going to use the AWS Lambda as a backend and build our API gateway as an API for our file upload. So here I'm going to create an API service. So we're going to choose the REST API, that is second last from the bottom. So click on a build, and here you're going to choose the API details, that is new API. Then let's give the name equal to, like, for example, say the demo file upload, demo JSON upload. So let me call my REST API as demo JSON upload. API endpoint type is equal to region, right? And click on a create API. So once you click on a create API, it will gonna create an instance of API gateway, and from there you need to configure the API gateway configurations. So right now we just created a container. Within that container we need to create a resources, we need to create a method, then we need to create a stages, and then create an API gateway with a usage plan, right? So first, as I said, let's create a resource. So what is that resource? Resource is a property within the API gateway through which you're gonna use that resource path to get a certain request served with using the REST API. So here let's call it as a JSON file upload. So let me call this resource as a JSON file upload. So why I'm giving this name? So it becomes more meaningful that with using this API URL, we are actually using it to upload a file, that is JSON file, into Amazon S3 bucket. So I'm going to create that resource with the name like JSON file upload. Let me create a method. Basically, if you see here, so whenever the resource has been created, underneath the resource we should create a method. So there is a bottom, that is option called methods. So we're going to click on create method. So what is this create method? Is basically underneath that resource it has to perform certain API actions, right? And that is where it is called as a method. So basically in the REST API, the method is the thing that is actually does the certain activity on the data. So here we're gonna do a post method. We're gonna construct a post method. So the post method will have the integration type. So basically the backend, as I showed in my just a while ago while explaining about the solution, we saw that our backend is basically AWS Lambda. So we're going to use this integration type called Lambda, while other options can be explored in the further options. And then the Lambda. So I have already created a Lambda for this particular purpose, which I'm going to explain it later cases as well. So here let's choose a Lambda name called upload file to S3. Or there is a Lambda name called upload JSON file to S3. So I'm going to choose that Lambda. So I have created a Lambda for this case. Okay, so then in that case, what is the prerequisite here is you need to have AWS Lambda pre-created. Rest all options, the timeout, let it be the whatever it is being given. In the method request you can just keep it blank. Query request you can also keep it whatever it's default. Request body also you can keep it default. So one more thing is underneath the method request settings, so you make API key as mandatory, because when you invoke this API URL from the internet, there should be some authentication mechanism. So here API key is acting as an authentication mechanism which will serve the JWT token to this particular API, and then your request will be processed after the authorizations. So I'm going to create this method, something like this, and then eventually what we'll have is, if you see here, currently it is creating a method. So once I click on that create method, it has created me the resource. Underneath the resource now we have a post method which is invoking my Lambda. Now you can always explore this. If you see here, right now we are the client. When I invoke this HTTPS post method of this particular API gateway API, then the request will hit our AWS Lambda, and the AWS Lambda will process the job, that is, receive the payload, convert into JSON, and upload that JSON as a file into the Amazon S3 bucket, and then sends the response back. So that is what activity will happen. We will see the logic inside. To use this API, we need to deploy as a stages in the API gateway. So that is what I'm doing now. So this is basically our third step. So we're going to click on deploy API. So in this deploy API, so right now there are no stages. So let me select the first option, that is new stages, and give the name. So let me give the name as version 1. What is that version 1? The JSON upload is a resource. So basically that API functionality, call it as a version 1 like that. And you can give a brief descriptions as you want, and then click on a deploy. So once you click on a deploy, what happens is, as you see here, so currently we have a stage called version 1, and then we have the resource, that is JSON upload, and finally if you go here you go, your REST API URL, which will help you to upload a file into Amazon S3 bucket via a payload, right? So that is now ready, right? So with this option, basically you are ready with the basic HTTPS endpoint for file upload, as I explained in the earlier part of this video. Now there is a next one, is basically fourth step that you need to complete is you go to in the bottom there is option called API usage plan, or generally called as a usage plan. So here we need to create a usage plan, in the sense in this usage plan we define how the API endpoint will be used and via using what API key, like that. So basically you are actually mapping your API key to this particular API gateway URL or API gateway's API basically. So here let me click on create a usage plan. So let me call it as as I know the JSON file upload demo. So let me call this as a usage plan. Here just as the part of demo, let me keep it as something like 100 burst equal to, let me call it as a 1k, and the number of requests is, let me call it as a 1 lakh, right? And then create a usage plan. So basically we defined ourselves what is the usage plan of that. Now let me go to the API key. So we have an API key already been created here. Now when I select this API key, so basically we can assign that API key to a usage plan. So let me call it as a add to the usage plan. So I'm going to go to that particular one, and here we're going to select the usage plan, that is JSON file upload. So then click on a save. So what did we do here is, basically as you see here, I have showed you how you can create an example usage plan, as you see here, right? And then with that usage plan, you're actually mapping an API key. Now you might be aware of that, how to create an API key. That is, just click on this create API key, give it name, and call it as auto generate. That's all. So basically this is how your API key will look like. So I have an example API key. So to this API key I have mapped the usage plan. Now we are successfully completed the API gateway creation. So if I go to this particular the API gateway, that is demo JSON file upload, and go to the stages, so basically you're going to get the API URL from the stages, not from the resources. So for your information, and then again you have to expand the stages, that is v1, and then go to your path of the resources, then go to the method, and here you go. So this is what our invoke API URL is. Okay, so with that, let me go to the second part of the demo, that is how did I create a AWS Lambda, and how the logic of that AWS Lambda is being written. So before I show you how did I create, I will like to show you that my Lambda function is been already created. So here you go, right? So the Lambda name is upload JSON file to S3 bucket. So this is a Python runtime Lambda, and this Lambda has a logic which will receive the payload from the API gateway, convert that payload into a JSON, and store it as a file into the Amazon S3 buckets. That is what logic has been written. So this is the logic I have stored in my VS Code. So let me first walk you through that, and then we're gonna see the demo. Right, so here I will show you the Lambda. That is, this is basically a code. So this is the code which is actually a Lambda code. So why I am saying it is a Lambda code? Because Lambda code has its own syntaxes. So generally, a Lambda code will have a function called Lambda handler, and then from there, the execution of the Lambda begins. All right. So here, let me just make it a little bit, open here. So let me quickly walk you through this file. It is not a big, complex file, but very simple file. So here we are actually importing these many modules, as you see here, that is JSON, Boto3 strings and random. And then, as I said, the Lambda always works on a function called Lambda underscore handler, and that will have two parameters. One is event and the context. As you know, the event is nothing but the API gateway invoke this Lambda whenever the request is being invoked, and that invocation will carry an event, and that event is nothing but your payload, right? That is basically body of your payload, right? So since the activity here is to upload into the Amazon S3 bucket, so we are using we are creating a S3 Boto3 client here. So with using the Boto3 client, we are actually contacting or reaching the Amazon S3 bucket APIs to create an object into the S3 bucket. So then the next task is, so I want to listen to the basically or get the event. That is, when the API gateway invokes the AWS Lambda, you will have an event, and that event is being retrieved here. And then we are actually creating the file name, that is basically key name in the Amazon S3 bucket, and then actually converting the the input, that is the event, into the JSON dumps. Okay, that is actually converts the dictionary to a JSON string. Right, and then this is the final API key, that is basically a Boto3 API, or we are actually using the Boto3. If you see here, so this S3 was our client above. Within that S3 Amazon S3 bucket Boto3 client, we are calling a function called put object, which has the bucket name, and this is my bucket name. By the way, I have created this bucket. I'm going to show you that. Then the file name, that is we are dynamically creating a file name, and the body. So body is nothing but the event that it listens from the API gateway, and that's all finally. So basically this is the only single command. It receives the payload, converts that payload into a JSON, creates a file JSON, and store it into Amazon S3 bucket. So that's all the magic is happening. And rest all is basically returning the. So if everything goes green, so we're gonna have this saying like object is uploaded as a message, while others are like the errors, that is key missing errors, client errors, or basically unexpected errors are all being captured. Now this logic is being being deployed into this particular AWS Lambda. And one more thing as a tip, so this Lambda has a permission, that is basically an IAM role. The IAM role is has the access. If I can show you, so this is the IAM role I have attached here, and this IAM role is an admin role, and it is trusted by AWS Lambda. So for your for your understanding purpose, let me open this particular IAM role, and I'm going to show you that, because if there is something wrong in the IAM role, the AWS Lambda will not work. So that's the reason I wanted to show you that quickly. So then we're going to go for the other options. Now this is an example IAM role, that is custom IAM role that I have created, and within this you see that I have a huge list of trust. But remember that this has to be trusted by AWS Lambda. So I have made, if you see the line number 25 here, right, so I have the lambda.amazon.com, right, and then it has the action, that is STS Azure, right. In the permissions, if I show you that permission, so it has all access, by the way, because just to make my job easy, I have given all access, but in your case give it only least privileges. Now with that, so all things are being done, and we have seen the code as well. Now time has come for the demo. Now as part of the demo, what I do is, so as I said here, we needed two things here. Either you can use the Postman, or you can use any programming languages. You can use PowerShell, you can use CLI, you can use the curl, you can use Linux, whatever you want to use it, you can use it. For now, let's try to invoke this API with using the Python here. So I'm going to copy this my endpoint, and we're going to see the demo of this particular API that we have built in. So for that case, just to invoke the API to upload a file, I have created a Python file, by the way, and I'm going to share these two files. So that is basically Lambda file plus this file for testing purpose. Again, as I said, you can always invoke from the Postman, which is basically suggested method for testing the API. And my example binary data is this one, that is if you see here, that is image binary. Now don't confuse with the image binary. Let me give it as a let me call it as a data dict. Okay, so this data dict is nothing but our payload, which we want it to be converted into a JSON and store it into the Amazon S3 bucket on the fly, right? So for that case, this is what the script is. So the script has a request that is being imported. It has the API URL, which is basically our API gateway URL, and the data, this is what we are more interested to store it on the fly. So remember that this is one instance of how this application, how this REST API endpoint can be used for file upload, that is JSON file upload. While when you have a API endpoint, this URL and the syntax how to invoke use it, you can wrap it in any application, and that's how the integration will happen. Now we have the API gateway gateway key that I have retrieved there, and then we have the header. So this is the syntax that you have to follow, because here we are dealing with the content type equal to application JSON. So it's not an application PNG, so you need to convert into application JSON basically, right? And then in the X API key, so that is our API gateway key. And here you go, we are using the request method to call a function called request with the method equal to post, which has the API URL as the API endpoint, and the header is nothing but that contains the API key and then the JSON equal to dictionary. Okay, so with that, this is how basically you can construct a Python code. It's just a mimicking the how you can integrate this API endpoint in your application or in your automation, wherever you want to use this the API endpoint for uploading the JSON file. Now what I do is I'm gonna go to the this particular path and try to invoke it. So I have did a CD to this path where this file has been sitting. So as you see here, this file is sitting underneath this particular big path. We did a CD to that path and then calling this particular Python file with a Python runtime, right? As you see here. Now let me invoke this file, okay, and see if a file gets stored in my in my API gateway. So if I go to this, we are getting a forbidden message. So this is also a good learning for you, that why we are getting a forbidden message. That is something I'm gonna I'm gonna explain you in a while. So I did some research and then came back to this recording. So here, if you see here, we are getting a message equal to forbidden. Why? Because if you go to the the API gateway configuration, and I went to the usage plan. So our usage plan name equal to JSON file upload. So into that we don't have an associated stage. So that was the missing piece. So let me add the API stage here. Remember that when you create a the usage plan, it has to be associated with the API stage and also with the API key. So then only it will work. So in our case, our API is demo JSON upload. So I'm going to use that. And the stage is of course the version 1 stage. And the rest all option, we don't need to we don't need to go ahead with the other options. So right for now, just click on associate. So then this gets associated. Then you also make sure that you have the associated API key. So this is my super secret API key, by the way. So I have copied that, and anyways we have pasted there. Now let's try to invoke it one more time and see what does that it returns now. So when I click on this one, and here it goes. So it says that the object is uploaded successfully. Now how do I validate that it is uploaded? By going to the S3 bucket. So that is our final resources. So let me copy the bucket name, that is basically our destination, that is S3 bucket. So let me copy that particular bucket, that is so this is my bucket which I'm going to copy, and let me go to the my another service, that is actually the Amazon S3 bucket, right? So here let me go to the bucket name that is actually called as a data source bucket name. So let me do a data source. So this is our bucket name, that is data source bucket name. And then here we're going to sort it by latest the latest modified. And so just now, since I invoked the API just now, right, at 1647, you see that we have a file being generated or file being created. So remember that we are creating this JSON file directly underneath the S3 bucket. So you will be available, those files will be available here. In some cases you might have the folder, so in that case you need to go to that folder. For now, let me try to download this and see if it contains the same the data as we have seen in the payload. So when I open this one, it will take me to this one. Here you go, right? So in the upload, if I go to the if I go to the payload and validate it, right? So remember that we are just storing the the body JSON, right? And that's the reason we should see this data, that is name, ID, and place are getting stored. While if you want to make it very explicit, you can also do that. So here you go. So we have a name, value, and everything is being getting stored. Okay, now if I want to make something changes, I can also do that. Say let me call the name equal to so let me give name equal to max and the ID equal to something extra. Okay, and then the place equal to, let me call it as a New York. So let me call it as a New York, right? So then let's store it and try to rerun it again, and just to test it again, we should see another file that is getting uploaded into the S3 bucket. So let me refresh it basically, and we have a third file that is getting uploaded. Alright, so with that note, I have shown you the things need to be shown in this video. Finally, a kind request, please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. With that note, thank you, thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.